All right, Christmas is coming. Things are getting nice and jolly. And so we're going to talk about one woman's descent into madness and the coming of the birth of the Antichrist. I am Anchorpete, and I am with my good friend and co-host, Mr. Danny, Dr. Zayas, G.O.D. How you doing
What's
tonight?
going on?
Did you, because I know Hanukkah just ended, right? Did you get any Tanis necklaces by any chance? Tanis charm necklaces?
Tons of Tanis root. Growing it just over there on my window. Tons of Tanis root growing. I think it's going to replace medical marijuana as the next big thing. So fun fact, Tanis root does not actually exist. It was written by the guy who wrote the book of Rosemary's Baby, complete invention. That's now been part of like pop culture for the last over 50 years, if my math is right.
Yeah, so I actually want to talk about the guy that wrote the book, Ira Levin, and I want to talk about Tanis. But we should tell everybody that today, as part of our Unholy Holidays, Danny and I are covering Rosemary's Baby. We're also going to be covering The Exorcist and The Omen, all the way leading up to Christmas. But Rosemary's Baby came out in 1968. This is the first time I've seen Rosemary's Baby. I'm assuming you've probably seen it multiple times, right?
I've seen it a bunch of times, but I was just thinking about this the other day. Whenever I say it's been 20 years since I've seen something, in my head, 20 years is like the early 1990s or like the mid 1990s. So when I say it's probably been 20 plus years since I've seen Rosemary's Baby from beginning to end. And I'm really glad that I rewatched it because my opinion of the movie is almost completely changed since I always liked the movie.
Yeah.
I always thought it was a good horror movie, but I never I was never scared by it, and I always thought it was super long and boring. And I guess that was just me younger. Like, of those three movies that we're going to be covering, I saw The Omen first.
Okay.
And The Omen, I'm pretty sure is the shortest of the three movies.
Okay.
And it probably has, I mean, obviously The Exorcist is The Exorcist, but The Omen does have a few like very violent set pieces with some action in there. And so this, to me, I probably saw this definitely after The Omen, probably after The Exorcist too. It's about 2 hours and 17 minutes.
Yes.
And when I was probably 14 or 15 years old, that felt like 3.5 hours, especially since most of the movie is spent like following a married couple and their elderly neighbors in an apartment building. As an almost 40-year-old adult who's lived in an apartment building his whole life and is friends with many elderly people in said apartment building, it is a lot better, and I enjoyed it a lot more this time around.
But we just do this because we love talking about this stuff. We want to hear what you guys think about it too, and we want to know what you guys think about the fact that this movie was directed by Roman Polanski. Are you guys big fans of Roman Polanski? Like, his early stuff obviously is part of the horror genre. Like, it's like he made his mark on the horror genre with this movie, and for me, this is the first time seeing this movie. And I just saw it like last night. I read the book of Rosemary's Baby when I was in college because one of my professors recommended it. But the first Roman Polanski movie I saw was The Tenant. Have you seen that, Danny?
So it's kind of ironic of his. He has his own little apartment horror trilogy. I've seen Repulsion, and I've seen this, but The Tenant is the one I haven't seen. It's interesting. I had this conversation with Athena earlier about, how do you discuss artists like Roman Polanski, and because of the fact that he has a very dark seedy past, and we're obviously, we don't condone anything that he's accused of doing, and he's not even, I believe, allowed to step foot in the United States. He'd be arrested right away, which is why he lives in France.
Right.
It's very Woody Allen-esque, and it's kind of like you said, he made his name in the horror genre. And Repulsion is fantastic. This movie is fantastic. And, it's annoying that you have, we had this happen to us where we reviewed Color Out of Space, and then all these terrible allegations came up about Richard Stanley, and we kind of scrapped that whole video pretty much. I'd like to think that, when this movie was being made, he was still in a relationship with Sharon Tate. This is pre any of those issues. And, his Sharon Tate was murdered, of course, by the Manson family. Yeah. Again, we're not justifying anything. And it's just, we're trying to separate art from artist as best as we possibly can, but we have to bring it up because, of course, it's there, you can't. But I never saw The Tenant. To get back to your question, I'm sorry about the.
No, all necessary stuff, man. All stuff that I think we should talk about. It is hard because in this particular genre, there are a lot of cases where the director has a scandal connected to them. I just think about the original Jeepers Creepers, right? Like that director, right? And I know there's like at least 5 other examples I could think of off the top of my head, but I'm real bad with names. But it's very clear that Roman Polanski is a very talented filmmaker.
Well, you brought up Ira Levin earlier, and I was reading on IMDb that this is considered to be one of the most accurate book-to-film adaptations. Mm-hmm. And they said that Polanski was so inexperienced as a filmmaker that he didn't realize he could take the poetic license. And he was and that he, even to the point where they said Charles Grodin's mustache at the end of the movie was done specifically because there's like a throwaway line in the book about how he had grown a faint mustache.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the book, by that logic, is great because the movie is great.
Yes. Yeah. As someone that read the book in college, I actually really enjoyed the book. And Ira Levin himself, this isn't the first thing that's been adapted out of his works either.
Oh, yeah.
He also did The Boys from Brazil, which is like this sort of like crazy thriller about like people trying to have Hitler be reborn through like genetic manipulation. Then he also did The Stepford Wives, which that in itself is a classic, right? And he's done a play, which is the longest running play ever, called Death Trap. And he also did A Kiss Before Dying, which I believe is adapted as well.
That's been remade. That was made in the 50s into a movie, and then it was remade, I think, with Matt Dillon back in like either the late 80s or early 90s.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a legendary author. I thought so many things about this movie that I really loved this time around, things that I never realized about this movie watching it this time. First of all, did you know that this was produced by William Castle?
I did. I did the research. I saw that. Yes.
And that William Castle is in the movie later on. He's the guy by the phone booth.
Right, right.
I have to bring this up.
Okay.
Where is it? My namesake is in this movie. Maurice Evans, who plays Hutch, is Dr. Zaius. And that movie, Planet of the Apes, came out in 1968. So he was a busy man in 1968. Maurice Evans had Rosemary's Baby and Planet of the Apes come out that year.
See, I'm so glad you pointed that out because I recognized the name. When I saw him as Hutch, I was like, that guy's familiar. Where do I know that guy from? And I love Planet of the Apes, the original movies. And I'm glad you made that connection, man. I would not have made that connection in my head. It's John Cassavetes, too, right? He's a famous director, right?
And I think his either son or brother is Nick Cassavetes. I don't know the familial relationship between them, but Nick is also an actor and maybe a director as well.
Yeah, that family, they have like filmmakers and actors in the family.
Yeah, right? I mean, obviously Mia Farrow was married to Frank Sinatra at the beginning of this movie. He actually divorced her mid-movie.
Right, right.
I was reading that William Castle because since we're going to be covering the Omen and the Exorcist after this, both of those films, definitely the Omen. I think the Exorcist also appeared on the Shudder series Cursed Films, and William Castle produced this movie. He believed that there was a Rosemary's Baby curse that followed the movie, and that's just kind of weird that all three of these movies, the Unholy Trilogy as they're known, all have like curses attached to them afterward, where like weird stuff went on and people died, and you know, it's probably all coincidence, but hey, you're dealing with movies that deal with evil, and they all deal with the devil, and you know, a couple of them involve the Antichrist. So yeah, why not have some curses attached to them?
You know, I gotta say that as a guy that is pretty skeptical, that doesn't believe in ghosts, demons, the afterlife, anything like that, there's certain material where I don't feel comfortable handling it, reading it, talking about it. It just feels like you're kind of poking at a beehive. And the kind of stuff that they say in this movie, the kind of material they show in this movie, it's that kind of material. So I would totally understand if this movie had some kind of curse connected to it, or people thought it had a curse. And before, you mentioned that this movie seemed like it was super long when you were a teenager watching it. And I think you kind of compared the Omen to it, saying the Omen had scarier, more brutal scenes. This movie really only has a handful of what you would consider scary scenes. And then there's almost no violence in this movie at all.
No. Polanski does deal a lot with paranoia. Like Repulsion is all about like what's happening to this woman. Is it in her head? And you could totally see that, but I've said this on this channel. I'm very skeptical when it comes to things like, you know, I'm not a very religious person, so anything involving religion doesn't really scare me. But what does genuinely scare me are cults. Cults are and that's why, like, you know, we go back to one of the first movies we covered on this channel was 1BR, and the idea of, you know, cults in modern day Los Angeles. It's not that weird of an idea.
Nope.
So if you take the Satanism aspect or the you know, Antichrist aspect out of it, there's still this, you know, this idea that you're not safe. Everyone that is in your circle is conspiring against you. No matter who you go out and talk to, everyone is in on it, and you're the one that makes me feel tense. The phone booth scene, you know, which is done in one unbroken take, is so like creepy and tense. And Mia Farrow was unbelievable in this movie. I mean, she looks, the way she goes from the beginning of the film to when she gets the haircut after she finds out she's pregnant, and she looks, and it's so weird. Everyone in the movie is like, "Whoa, you look terrible." Like, they're so blatantly blunt with her. They're like, "Oh, your hair looks awful," and "Oh, you look so pale," and like, "Oh, are you sick?" And but like, I felt like that's exactly what we're doing as the audience. We're looking at her and being like, Jesus Christ, this woman is, you know, you've had, your wife has been pregnant and had kids. My wife has been pregnant and had kids. You know, when a woman's pregnant, it's, you know, she glows, the most beautiful time. You know, obviously they're going to get bigger for obvious biological reasons. Yeah. And like the minute you find out she's pregnant, it's almost like she starts to wear away, and it has a psychological effect on us watching it.
Yes.
And as it's having an effect on her, and it really is tremendous. It's filmmaking, but it's also her performance is so good.
Yes.
Yeah, I was reading that like they sold her on this movie basically being like, you make this movie, you'll win an Oscar. And and I was reading like basically she had won every award pre-Oscar season and then didn't get nominated. which I would call it blatant bias against horror movies, but Ruth Gordon did win Best Supporting Actress for playing Minnie Cassavetes, the Cassavetes, the neighbor. So, you know, it's still, you know. And of course, the only other thing I'm going to bring up, since I mentioned cults, a large group of naked old people immediately made me think of Hereditary, which is, as I've said, the scariest movie I've seen in the last probably 2 decades. So when I see that scene in the, you know, the rape sequence, the dream / rape sequence, it made me think of Hereditary right away. And I was like,
Yes. You know, there's like so much to unpack in what you just said. You know, I'm so glad they brought up Hereditary, because I kept thinking of Hereditary when I watched this movie. And I think that what Hereditary does well and what this does well is that it's never like blatantly obvious that the evil people in the movie are evil and that like no one else can see it. Towards the end, obviously, it becomes more and more apparent, but you could write this movie off to where maybe it's in Rosemary's head. Maybe she's just imagining things because her pregnancy is making her delirious. There kind of crosses a line, and you're like, okay, I think it's gone a little too far at this point. But that's what I liked about this movie so much. It's from a different time. Obviously, when it was made in the 1960s. And so women were treated differently. Women were looked at differently. Gender roles were different. And so the way that she's talked to, she's often talked to in a condescending way. She's kind of put in her place. Obviously, it's not as easy for her to communicate with other people in this movie. And so she kind of gets herself in this predicament where she's all alone. But you mentioned Minnie, the neighbor, and you mentioned how that actress, Ruth Gordon, got the Academy Award for Best Actress or Best Supporting Actress. And that makes perfect sense to me. Like, I think if I think about this movie, besides obviously some of the iconic scenes that are in it, her performance really stands out because she's like this horror creature in herself. She's just always there. She's always coming up to Rosemary. Oh, I'll take this for you. I'll get this. Oh, here, let me get your mail for you. Oh, these people are coming over. I'll serve this food. She's like the most fucking annoying, tenacious person in the world. And if she was my neighbor, I would move out of my house or apartment if she was my neighbor.
So her performance is amazing because I grew up in the apartment building that I'm living in now. Right. And as a kid, my grandmother lived in this building. So I knew all of the old ladies in the building. They were all my grandmother's friends. They were all like, my dad knew them growing up and was friends with their kids. And Minnie comes across as that kind of annoying old lady neighbor who you don't want to bump into in the laundry room because she's just going to talk your ear off. And it's like, I just want to throw the clothes in the dryer. Like, Minnie, come on. How's school? How's work? How's everybody? How's this? And you just like, you know what? I'm going to do my laundry later. And I grew up in a building, you know, I'm Jewish. We used to call them yentas, you know, the yentas in the building. And she's she's a yenta who happens to be a Satanist. But like her like the forcing of the food and the drinks, I grew up with that stuff. I know that stuff. My single favorite, I think the moment that won her the Oscar, though, and I wrote it down, it's my favorite moment of the movie because it's the most perfect encapsulation of that character, is the very end of the movie when Rosemary drops the knife and she takes the knife out of the floor and takes a second to kind of, you know, just work on the scratch that's on the floor, all while they're like presenting Satan's baby over there. And it's like, oh, go sit down, honey, sit down. Oh, my floor. And it's just like, there you go. Perfect. Perfection. I love it. Yeah. You know, and how many horror movies are there where the lead villains of the movie are senior citizens? You know, there's something inherently creepy about that.
Yes.
You know, there's some, you know, like those movies stick out, you know, like Hereditary again. M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit. I don't know if you saw that, but like there's something innately creepy about, you know, old people who are out to get you, and
that are intentionally like invading your life, that they're just like invasive, right? Because they're always friendly and they're always giving you things, which is something you expect from elderly people. Elderly people have tons of free time. They have nothing else to do, so they want to help you. They want to be a part of your life. And you don't realize that they are becoming a part of your life because they want to use you for something. And that's very creepy. I think that's a really good point, man. And it's scary how they are quickly able to persuade Rosemary's husband, Guy, to essentially join their cult and allow her to be raped by the devil to have the devil's baby. And so there's this one sequence that, I mean, the sequence that one of the main sequences that stands out in the movie is when Rosemary is drugged and she does have sex with the devil. And they're all naked, like you said. But Minnie has this one line of dialogue where she's like, oh, if she drank the tea, she should be dead to the world. And she's so different from the way that she is throughout the rest of the movie. Because the rest of the movie, she is like that kind of typical New York, you know, elderly lady, that annoying neighbor. But then she's very straightforward and cold when she's talking to Guy. And that really gave me chills, that sequence. Also, in that sequence, there's that one line where Mia Farrow's like, oh, this isn't a dream. This is real. And I've seen that on so many like top 10 or top 100 horror countdown shows or YouTube videos where people use that particular scene. And I kind of wanted to backtrack and just talk about Mia Farrow for a second too. Because yes, Ruth Gordon is fantastic in the movie, but Mia Farrow really does carry the whole movie. And you gave her a lot of credit too. Like, I don't think there's one scene in the movie without Mia Farrow, right?
I mean, almost. Yeah. I mean, she's literally the main character title to. She even is the one doing the la la la's in the intro and the exit of the movie. I mean, yes. She's on screen even when she's not on screen in this movie. You know. Yeah. And I feel like her as an actress gets lost in a lot of the tribulations about her life, whether it was Sinatra to Woody Allen and everything that went on with Woody Allen. A lot of people today hear Mia Farrow and they probably don't connect her with being a great actress. Right. And like this performance solidified her as a big time actress. And, you know, she went on to do tons of movies with Woody Allen, which were all critically acclaimed. And, you know, it's a shame that her acting does kind of get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah. This movie, you know, she really stands out, but there's a word that we use so commonly nowadays, which is called gaslighting. And this movie it has it so much where it's like, oh, that's nothing. What they're talking about over there, like her friend presents her with a book that essentially is revealing the whole witchcraft cult, and everyone essentially dismisses her. She gets dismissed frequently. Her pregnancy, like half of her pregnancy, she's in intense pain. And like she has a doctor that's involved in this cult and he writes off her pain. And she has to drink these disgusting drinks, and like she doesn't want to drink them, but her husband says you have to, the neighbor says you have to. Even after she gives birth, they try to write it off as if she lost the baby, and they're like having her pump out her breast milk. And it's just this whole movie is just about this manipulating this woman and misleading her. And like, I don't think it would fly if it was in theaters nowadays, right? I think that
I was just thinking like along the same lines, like it would be, they tried to do a remake of this with Oh,
Zoe Saldana.
I was gonna say Gamora. Yeah, Zoe's.
Right.
And like I didn't see it, but I didn't hear overwhelmingly positive things.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like it's hard for me to see this. Like you said, this is a very 1960s movie. You know, there's a lot of things that wouldn't, fly for 1960 for the modern times. The idea, you think about just like modern times, everything in this movie is revealed through books where, 2021, you'd probably Google everything and there'd be scenes of Rosemary on her computer. There's absolutely no way that they would actually be using Scrabble tiles and Scrabble, which I love because I love Scrabble.
Oh, okay.
And
really?
that scene, by the way, gave me legit chills because there's something about like solving a puzzle in a horror movie, and then the puzzle, the solving of that puzzle, like scaring the person who saw that always gets to me. Any scene like that, and when she realizes like that Roman, Minnie's husband, is actually the son of this like witch that lived in the building.
There's a reason why this is iconic. Sherry and I were talking about this. It doesn't really have flaws. There's not things to nitpick. It's just really strong. And like you said at the very beginning, it's very faithful to this book. I of course have seen The Exorcist multiple times, so I know what to expect for our next review. I have not seen The Omen, but obviously we've picked a theme, right? And the theme is innocent people sort of being corrupted by the purest of evil, right?
Yeah.
That's what all these are about. Just religion is the wrapping that it's in, but it's essentially innocent people and the most evil force you can think of. And I think that this was a great start to this trilogy.
I'm really glad I rewatched it because I have a totally new appreciation for this movie. Right. If you would have asked me just yesterday before I rewatched it, I would have said, this is easily the bottom of these three movies for me. I don't know anymore. I live in New York. I don't live in Midtown Manhattan where the Bramford is, but I live in New York. I live in an apartment building. I'm surrounded my entire life by elderly neighbors. This movie feels like home to me. It's also really weird. I don't know it's just, you don't usually see big city horror movies. So there's something interesting about that. Like living, you live in a suburb of Austin, which is a huge city, capital of Texas. I live in New York. You used to be from New York. Like, we're used to big cities, and like all the horror movies that we watch are either like suburban, like even like Halloween is like, Haddonfield's like a little suburb, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is out in the middle of the, just there's nothing around for miles.
It's like 40 minutes from my house.
Is it really?
Well, yeah, it's kind of close, but not 40 minutes, but yeah.
Yeah, but like, it's very rare to see that kind of big city horror film. So it was nice. It was good to see that as well.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up. Like, as we were kind of wrapping this up, because like, I didn't even think about that. You're right. Like, I think horror, to be the most applicable to people, they try to make it be set in these sort of suburban settings where most people live, these kind of more rural settings. Even though a ton of people live in the city, not a lot of people could afford to live in these apartments, right? And that was one thing I'm glad you brought that up too, was their apartments were fucking ridiculous. Like, their apartments are like mansions, right?
When she goes through the closet of at the end and she enters into the Cassavetes apartment, I'm like,
yeah.
I feel like also living in the city with so many people, it lends itself more to like, police dramas and crime stories and, because, I'm literally listening. I don't know if you could hear, but there's sirens outside my right now. Like either a cop car, fire truck, or an ambulance just drove by. Right. Michael Myers isn't out there, but there's tons of people who are always in need of emergency services. So it doesn't lend itself. It's weird. Yeah, it's where all the people are, but horror feeds on the you're alone. There's nobody around to help you. And that just fits usually better in the suburbs in rural America. So that's one thing that's nice about Rosemary's Baby also.
Yeah, and that's a good way to kind of bring it all together, you know, with Mia Farrow's performance and with everyone around her. They're able to isolate her. They're able to make her feel alone in the middle of the biggest city on the planet. Yeah. Right? And so I think that's a really great way to kind of just wrap it all up right there. You know, I now you're making me want to watch Repulsion now too, because I really did like The Tenant.
The Tenant I think is on my like Hulu watch list, so maybe I'll try to give that a watch.
I'll watch it again, and then we can talk about that too.
Yeah. All right. So the Exorcist is next week.
Exorcist is next week. So if you guys are down, I know you've all seen The Exorcist. Come join us. Let us know what y'all think about The Exorcist. Where do you rank it? How do you rank these 3 movies? And make sure you follow us on Instagram. We're the Lastercast. All right, well, then that is this episode for this week. If you guys haven't liked and subscribed, please do. And we will see you next week for The Exorcist. And Dr. Zayas in the bottom.